Hello and welcome to Book Dreams. I'm Eve Yohalem.
And I'm Julie Sternberg.
Julie and I have a lot in common. We both live in New York City. We're both children's book writers, and we both hate talking about ourselves. So I'm going to tell you about Julie. Julie is the author of Like Pickle Juice on a Cookie and its sequels. She's also written the Top Secret Diary of Silly Valentine series, and she has a new book coming out in 2021.
Yes. And Eve is the author of the middle grade novels Cast Off, The Strange Adventures of Petra de Winter and Bram Broen. And she's also the author of the upcoming The Truth According to Blue, which is coming out in May.
Julie and I have been talking about books together for a very long time. We first met attending our very first children's book conference, and we spent the day together at that conference. Neither one of us had published a book yet at that point. And
you had an agent.
I had an agent.
I was jealous.
Yeah, but you were soon to have an agent.
Yes, that's true.
And we've been friends ever since.
How many years ago was that?
It was 2007.
Seven. Oh, okay.
And here we are today.
It's very exciting. Should we talk about how we decided to do the podcast?
Yes. So fast forward to October of 2019 and...
Okay. I don't think you even know this, but the story actually begins about a year earlier when Paul and I were sitting in a little restaurant in a town in upstate New York.
Paul's your husband.
Paul's my husband. And he turned to me and he said, if we were to open a bookstore, what would that be like?
Paul?
I know. Do you know what I said to him?
Wait, I just need to clarify. Paul, because that could be misconstrued as, you mean your husband who's never read a single book? Your husband is a reader.
He is definitely a reader.
That surprise in my voice, nothing, no judgment on Paul, nothing negative.
No, but he's a very practical, rational human being.
Yes.
So when he said this to me, when he said, what do you think it would be like if we were to open a bookstore up here? What would that feel like? My response to him was, do not do this to me. Because I knew what would happen. I knew that he would have this little thought experiment and enjoy it for about 5 minutes and then promptly go on his merry, lawyerly way. He's a lawyer. And I, for years and years to come, would continue fantasizing about our bookstore.
But don't tell me you had never thought about it before, because I think you and I had talked about
No, it's not true that I had never thought of it before, but I had always had that. Well, Paul, this is not going to happen.
This is a non-starter.
This is a non-starter in our family. And then he made it a starter. Mm-hmm. So then I approached you and I said, Eve, what do you think of doing this project together? Because yes, I was supposed to be doing it with Paul, but I knew that on a day-to-day basis, I would need a real partner. And I thought you might be a wonderful partner. Now you have to tell me, what were you honestly thinking when I said that?
I was honestly thinking that it's one of my dearest fantasies and that it's a non-starter because everybody knows that you can't make a success out of a bookstore. There are just certain businesses where there's almost no chance it'll work. So I was being the realist in the situation and saying, sure, I'd love to open a bookstore. I'd also love to eat nothing but chocolate cake. And, there are just some things we want and can't have.
Right. For a while, I sent you books like Diary of a Bookseller.
And I think I politely said, oh, looks great.
I'm not reading that, I think was the message. And then my older daughter went to college and I got pretty blue. I've always loved solitude before because I write and then I go home and I have my family to keep me company. But now that she was in college and Isabel, my younger daughter, was spending less time at home. So the solitude started to feel a little like an abyss. And I was like, all right, I've got to do something to end this. So I went back to Eve and I said, okay, I understand the bookstore is not going anywhere at the moment, but what are we going to do?
We were having breakfast when this happened. Did you come to the breakfast intending to ask me, hey, how about a podcast? Or did it just come up? It felt to me like it just came up.
I think I just came and I was feeling blue. I was feeling blue about that. And I was feeling blue about the state of the world.
Yes. I was also feeling blue about the state of the world.
Right. Your children are a little farther along. So you had moved through the emotions of the empty nest.
I was in a different phase of the emotions about the empty nest, so I wasn't feeling blue about that.
Right.
But at the same time, both of us have been full-time writers for a bunch of years now. And I was definitely feeling like with my kids gone, there was room in my life to do something else.
Right.
And I didn't know what that something else would be. I did not bring up a podcast because I'm about to tell you something that I have not told you before, which is that I think I had listened to maybe one episode of one podcast when you said so I was thinking about a lot of things I might do, but podcast was not on the list.
Do you get those alerts on your phone about screen times, how much time you've spent on?
I do.
Mine practically say, stop listening to podcasts.
Totally.
Delete the podcast app.
So there we are, having breakfast.
And my memory, at least the way I have constructed the narrative in my head, is that we decided we would be excited about a podcast. Then we're trying to figure out what the podcast would be about. We always wanted it to be about something that brings joy. And of course, to the two of us, books bring joy. And so then you said, well, this is my memory anyway. You said, how about a podcast about what Harper Lee did all day after To Kill a Mockingbird came out? I've always been fascinated by that. We could do a podcast about this. And now that you have said that you never once listened to a podcast, this makes a little more sense because I could not wrap my head around how we would do an entire podcast. And let's just say that there is a fascinating book about this.
Yes.
Called Furious Hours by Casey Sepp.
Whom we admire to a level that approaches fandom. And
yes, highly recommend.
So love to have Casey Sepp on our podcast
Casey,
and to talk about what.
If you're listening.
Okay. Somehow one of us said maybe our podcast could be about questions we've always had about books. And I think I also at that point said, and do you know what I just found out recently? Because I had just read this book. Did you know that the Little Women that we grew up reading and that our mothers grew up reading and our grandmothers grew up reading is not the original version of Little Women?
Right.
And I think that may have caught your interest a little bit, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. So I think right then and there, we decided that we would try to have an episode about how the original Little Women varies from the Little Women that we all read.
Spoiler alert, it varies significantly, and we have an episode coming up about that.
Yes. And we also decided then and there that we would have an episode on what it's actually like to own a bookstore, because the dream continues, people.
Yes, it does. It does. So that's how we got here. I want to highlight what you said before, which is we started this podcast because we wanted to do something joyful, something that brought us joy, something that we hope will bring other people joy. And so far, it has.
Yes.
Almost everyone we've reached out to has said yes. It has been yes after yes after yes. We've been able to talk to people we never would have met about subjects we think are really interesting and fascinating that we hope you will also think are really interesting and fascinating.
We have an incredible lineup of guests and some fascinating episodes coming up. For example, we have an episode in the works about book design with interviews with Ellen Lupton and Rafe Larson. We have an episode about what it takes for a book to become a bestseller, where we interview Dan Blank and Miranda Beverly Whittemore, as well as Matthew Jockers, who wrote a book called The Bestseller Code. We have an interview about the bookmobile run from the Parnassus bookstore in Nashville. Parnassus is the bookstore owned by Ann Patchett. Kevin Foster is the manager of the bookmobile, and we have a terrific interview with him.
We also have an episode coming up about what it's like to edit literary icons with Leonard Marcus, and another episode about rare books with Nico Lowry.
We talked to Jim Mustick about what books should we read before we die?
And of course, we interviewed Anne Boyd Rue about the original Little Women and how it compares to how it compares to these virgin. There's so much sex in the original. And of course, we have an episode coming up about the original Little Women, where we interviewed Anne Boyd Rue. So please do connect with us. Please find us on Instagram. We are at Book Dreams Podcast. And on Twitter, we are at Book Dreams Pod, because I think podcast was too long for a Twitter handle. And on our website, bookdreamspodcast.com, and send us emails at contact@bookdreamspodcast.com. Come listen to Book Dreams with Julie and me.